just wait to see the participants join.
Let's go. All right, Colin, are you ready to get going?
I'm ready to go. I'm ready when you are.
Go for it.
Are you doing in the start introduction, or am I?
Why don't you do the introduction and the appointment of the chair, and then I'll pick up at the orientation. It's probably best to have someone from the village do that part.
Okay, sounds good. So welcome everyone to this meeting of the Advisory Land Use Committee. I don't know anyone because this is my first go around with this committee as well. I'm relatively new to the village of Pemberton. I'm planner 2 is my official position. Yeah, so just welcome everyone. The first order of business is appointment of a chair and an alternate. And so I guess the first is to open the floor to any nominations.
Or volunteers.
Or volunteers. Don't everyone raise their hands at once.
I mean, this is literally my first time doing anything like this, so I'd rather sort of sit back and look at how the process works. So I'd like to step back if that's okay.
Done this many times. I think that's the first time I've seen someone decline a non-nomination. So that's excellent. Do we have any volunteers? Anyone who would like to take it? It's quite simple. It really, the role consists of working with staff to approve the agendas, the minutes, and then simply running the meeting. And we'll be giving a session today about how those meetings are run. And staff will always be here as a resource. So it ought not be too intimidating.
Okay, I can do it. I'll do it.
Yay. So properly, we should have someone move.
Yeah. So if somebody could move Jagoda, did I say your name right?
Yagoda, yes.
Yagoda,
Mhm.
as chair. Is anyone willing to be an alternate?
I can move that, and I could be the alternate if anybody.
Okay. And then we need a seconder.
I can second that.
Right, so next seconds. Any discussion? And none, so vote all in favor. Right, any opposed? Motion carries. So then I'll hand the meeting over to Yagoda.
Oh, great. Okay, well, I'll first introduce myself. Yep, my name is Yagoda. So I'm, the village of Pemberton resident here. Yeah, my background is working for the municipality of Whistler, an environmental coordinator position there. So, but I'm just off right now in the winter, for the winter. So happy to help out. And okay, so I guess I was reading through, so I'm starting the meeting now, right? I guess.
Yeah, Yagoda, do you have the chair notes in front of you?
Oh, in front of me. Should probably quickly open those up. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, when I was reading them, I was like, told myself that I'm not going to be chair, but then thought, well, why not? Okay. Oh, actually can't find it here. Oh, maybe this is it. Yeah, I don't quite have it. Sorry.
Carson, do you have them in front of you?
Yeah, I do. I can read it. Do you want me to read? So, okay. So I'll just read it. In honor of the Lillooet, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting in the unceded territory of the Lillooet Nation. This meeting of the Advisory Land Use Commission is being held virtually with all meeting participants attending via electronic communications to adhere to the provincial health officer's orders respecting physical distancing requirements as a measure to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. ALUC members will be involved in and participate in the meeting virtually as they would in person. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. And now I think next would be it says orientation.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay, a motion to approve the agenda. Is everybody in favor?
Yep, in favor.
Okay.
In favor.
Do we need a seconder? I don't think so.
I second if we need it.
Okay. And then appointment of the chair?
Yeah, so you've already done that. It was a bit backwards.
Oh, right. Okay.
And then
Okay.
Cameron's orientation and then adoption of the minutes.
Okay. Adoption of the minutes, right. Approval of the agenda, adoption of the minutes. Okay. Just their minutes, recommendation is that the minutes of the LUC meeting being held on November 30th, 2020, 2019 be adopted, November 30th, 2020 be adopted as circulated, as well as the minutes from September 23rd, 2019. So we need a mover and a seconder for that.
Okay.
So that I could move that because I was there for those
Okay.
meetings.
Yeah, I don't think as chair I can actually move,
No.
right? So, okay.
And I'm
I
always
was-
on moving or seconding when I wasn't at a meeting. Minutes.
Yeah. So same with me. I was not on the committee at that point.
So that's a good point. And I know that it's uncomfortable. The one thing that's odd about these sort of things is kind of like a council, it acts as a body, and the body never really dies, it continues on. And this is hopefully the last of these kind of formalities where you'll have to deal with something that's hanging over. It's been well over a year since one of these has been convened, I believe. So in order for the recommendations in the minutes of that last meeting to be formalized, they do need to be approved by the body. So if you're not comfortable doing it, we can't force you to do it, but it would just mean that those minutes, it's as though that meeting never officially happened.
I mean, I'm willing to trust that the minutes are taken down as it occurred. So I know the people that take the minutes from these sort of things. So I trust that they do a good job. So I'm happy to second that.
Okay, all in favor? Oh, I've lost it. Everybody's in favor. Okay. I've lost where we are here. Hold on.
It's Cameron's orientation.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, so we're back to, okay, so I guess, yes. I guess Cameron, you're taking over from here. You're gonna present the application.
Through the chair, I think I'm going to give kind of an overview of the commission, how it functions, and then
Okay,
some guidelines or some tips on how you may want to run the meetings based on some experience. But before we do that, why don't we just do a quick kind of a Hollywood Squares and introduce ourselves so we know who's on the call.
okay.
So I'll take the lead on that. Kristen, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Okay, my name is Kristen McLeod. I am the general manager of the Pemberton Valley Supermarket. Also, I was on council for a term of 3 years and have been on the ALUC committee before, so in various committees.
Okay, and Dr. Fisher?
Yeah, hi, my name's Nick Fisher. I'm one of the doctors in Pemberton. Been here for 7 years, over 7 years now. I have zero experience in town planning or committees in terms of politics, full stop. However, I'm a very enthusiastic participant in the sort of planning and use of the land in Pemberton, and I've been involved in a few of these sort of meetings at the council level. So I'm keen to have some input that might be.
Ms. Elmore.
Hi there. My name is Jeanette Elmore. I have worked as a land use planner for over a decade. Currently, I'm a full-time mom, part-time contract planner. I've worked in development planning and policy planning, most recently at the city of Richmond before we moved up here during COVID.
And Ms. Kozakowska.
Oh, nice, good pronunciation. Okay, yeah. So just as mentioned before, yeah, lived in Pemberton, yeah, for over 4 years now, and then been working at the municipality of Whistler, yeah, just covering maternity leave there for a few years. Yeah, so that's kind of my only experience with these meetings. Yeah, as I used to run the Bear Advisory Committee meetings at Whistler, so I have a little bit of experience, but kind of from a more of a work perspective, not as a volunteer, but I'm happy to be here with some input, mostly on environmental factors, kind of my specialty.
Mr. Brown.
Yes, hi. So I'm Colin Brown. So I'm a planner too, sometimes referred to as senior planner with the Village of Pemberton. Yeah, I look after mostly current planning and some long range planning. So you'll see a fair bit of me with presentations to this group. No, I'll be back later on with the application for tonight.
Excellent. And Mr. McRae.
Hey, hello. Yeah, I'm Scott McRae, manager of development services with the Village of Pemberton. So I think you may have all seen my name on emails at some point already. I'm fairly new to town and fairly new to meetings of this style. So I'm looking forward to the orientation here so I can understand how these ones work as well. Yeah, that's all.
Ms. Segovia.
Hi, I'm Nikki Segovia. I'm the building and planning clerk at the village. I've been there for 2.5 years, and I mostly take care of the formalities in the building and planning departments. And over to you, Cameron.
All right. Well, my name is Cameron Chalmers. I'm a planning consultant. I have a company called Cameron Chalmers Consulting, which I've been operating for a little over 10 years. I do a mix of land use and development work, mostly at the Village of Pemberton, and then for private sector clients. I tend to work mostly at a community master plan scale. Before that, I spent a decade or so, a little bit around that, as the director of planning at the District of Squamish, and some time in Alberta beforehand. So I'm on contract with the village. I helped them out with a number of things, and one of the things they've asked me to do is to share some ideas on this commission and how it could work. So just a little bit of background. This group has not met a lot over the last year, and part of it has been COVID, and part of it has been the nature of the applications the village has been dealing with. A lot of the applications were, I guess, what we kind of classify as implementation applications. They were ones that were working on zoning approvals or existing zoning. Sunstone, for example, has been in play for 20 years, depending on who you ask, and actively for the last 4 or 5 years. And we're heading into a time where I anticipate this group will meet regularly. There's some very significant land use decisions heading towards the village. There's an official community plan review that's starting. There's a lot of irons in the fire right now. So I do not take the last couple years of inactivity with this group to be any indication of what's what it's likely going to deal with. There is a lot going on. I have 20 some odd years experience with commissions just like this, and they can be incredibly valuable to the village at a staff level and at a council level in terms of helping get a second set of eyes on land use matters, some additional input. A lot of times we're working with communities and working with the public and get a lot of mixed ideas, but don't have an opportunity to sit down and have concentrated discussions about land use matters. And that's something that I know is starting to really happen at a staff level at the village now. And this group will be a great extension of that. So I guess I can't speak for the village, but on behalf of the village, thank you for volunteering your time and your energy to this group. They can be a lot of fun. They can be a lot of work, but they definitely have an impact. So I look forward to working with you to the extent that I do on that. What I'd like to do now is just run through a bit of a presentation. Yes, I have permission. Just let me pull this up. Go to the beginning. All right, so hopefully everybody can see that. And so really this is intended to be a brief orientation session, and I'll just start my remarks by saying that there's some things in here that are kind of requirements and obligations when we talk about the role of the committee. That's the first little bit of, first 5 or 10 minutes or so of the presentation. The second half is some ideas around how you might have productive and meaningful meetings. And the reason I raise that is, like I said, I've conceived these commissions and they've been very successful. I've also conceived commissions that didn't work very well. And when I was asked to put this presentation together a couple of years ago, I kind of sat back and reflected on what worked and what didn't. And so it's a bit of trial and error, but it's by no means a fixed formula. It's just an idea. It's a suggestion to the group. You can find your own way, however you like. But some of the ideas that I'm going to share hopefully will help you align yourselves in a way where your meetings are useful and productive for everyone. So again, I jumped ahead of myself as I always do, but that's really what we're going to talk about today is the role of this commission, and then a way to get to what I like to call consensus-based resolutions that are forwarded to council. So generally, this is a commission that's established under provisions of the Local Government Act, which regulates a lot of land use regulates all of the land use planning bylaws, what municipalities can do, what they can't do. And one of the things that it does allow is it allows for advisory planning commissions. And those can take a couple different forms. The village uses that same authority for an advisory design review commission, which focuses more on the form and character of buildings and development at a site scale. This particular group really is intended to look at land use planning at a policy level. So that's like policy analysis, including community and neighborhood planning, housing, economic development. So there's a good likelihood that you will have matters referred to you by staff or by council that are dealing at a policy level, particularly heading into a year of an official community plan review. I would expect that there's a lot of things there. The village has been churning out a fair bit of draft policy, all of which is coming to a head and will be coming to this group in various forms. So that's the policy level. The current development or the development planning level, this group by bylaw will review applications for amendment to the official community plan and zoning bylaw. There are several of those that are active right now. There's a live OCP amendment application for the benchlands, for example, that we're not quite in a position to bring that forward yet, but the process is slowly but surely ramping up, and we expect that will be before this commission at least once. Major development applications. So again, those would tend to be larger scale applications where we're talking about policy level matters. We won't go through all of the different development applications and what they might mean in terms of the amount of discretion that's involved. But, for example, development permits might be a tool that you've heard about. It's a tool that the village uses to regulate form and character of buildings. Those applications are probably more prone to go to the Advisory Design Review Commission, but if it involves a rezoning, it would come here as well. So really, the agendas will be put forward based on the bylaw and the matters that this commission is to review under that bylaw, and then also matters that are referred to it by council. So council can, at any point, request input from this group on any matter that it sees fit. There's a few things that I know you probably received, and if you haven't already, you will, a package about how some of your obligations as a member of this committee and what it means to be on the Advisory Land Use Commission. There's certain things that we need to be cautious of, such as avoiding conflict of interest. Some of those rules are clear and sometimes they're not clear. Staff will always be available as a resource if you're wondering if if a project's too close to your home, or if you have a fiduciary or financial interest to a project. Like, there's different levels that need to be assessed about things like conflict of interest. But this is a formalized body. It will work with some formal procedures, as you saw. And really, we need to make sure that we follow some of those things. And some of the basic ideas or basic rules is that this is a commission, and it really works. It works as a body. So as an individual commissioner, there's no authority bestowed on the individuals of the group. It only gets its power when they come together. And sometimes that can be frustrating because you might have a great idea, but you need at least a couple of your colleagues to agree with you in order for it to work. But it's very important that the business be conducted during the meetings with a quorum of the commission. So this is not a muzzle. It doesn't preclude you from taking opinions on land use matters. It doesn't preclude you from having opinions about what's happening in your community. But, for example, if you wanted to, as a private citizen, comment on a development application, it wouldn't be appropriate to represent yourself as a member of the Land Use Commission. Similarly, if you wanted to meet with a colleague from this commission to have a coffee, that's perfectly fine. But if 3 or more of you were to meet for a coffee and talk about what you should do with a particular application, that's probably considered doing business, and you should wait for the meeting. So again, if you ever have any questions about these, Colin or Scott can be a resource to help you along the way. But really, you do your business as a commission and a commission member in the meetings. There's no obligation or expectation that you go out and do anything outside of this as an individual. And in fact, that's one area that can get a little bit problematic if you're in any way trying to speak on behalf of this commission. This commission, its role and its primary job is to communicate back and forth with council. So council may refer you matters, or they have established a bylaw that directs certain matters to be referred to you. And the way you communicate your decisions is by way of a resolution. So just like we first and seconded the agenda and passed it by a majority vote, that's how you communicate with council. So we're going to go through a bunch of different ways that you can put together those recommendations. But at the end of the day, the most valuable thing this group will produce is a resolution that gets forwarded to council for them to consider. And so individual comments, individual thoughts, individual submissions, those are all really important in framing the recommendation. But what matters and what council will review and what staff will action is the contents of a resolution. So in terms of the roles, staff, there's kind of 3 groups that have a role here. There's staff, applicants, and the members. Staff will do all of the administration for the meeting, so scheduling, agendas, minutes, all that stuff. Staff will always present an overview of an application, providing any specific requests where they're seeking comment or generalized requests. It's staff's role to work with the applicants and address the comments. So again, we would discourage you from any interaction with individual applicants. It doesn't happen often, but I do know design panel members in other communities who will receive the occasional phone call from a developer, and we'd simply request that if you do get contacted by an individual developer to talk about your role in this group, that you decline any invitations to talk about a project. You can get the information at the meetings. Applicants, their role is to present the proposed land use changes, the rationales, the background of their project, whatever material they deem necessary for your consideration in the meeting. And then the members, you're to listen to what you've been presented, discuss it with yourselves, share ideas, debate if necessary, but ultimately your role is to provide a recommendation by way of a resolution to council. So this is a looser group, and that's good. And I think at a staff level, we like it that way. But there's still some general meeting decorum. The chair runs the meetings, just like a council meeting. And if you've watched those, they're maybe perhaps a little more formal and a little more adherent to Robert's rules. Although even council meetings aren't rigid at the village necessarily. It's really important though that you do establish some communications protocols, and typically staff and applicants should only speak through the chair. So what that means is that, you know, if I have a great comment and I want to blurt it out as a staff level, that's not appropriate. I should wait till I can raise my hand if we're in a live meeting, or virtually if we're on a Zoom meeting, and raise my hand, wait to be acknowledged by the chair so that the conversation doesn't become people talking over one another. And so it's the chair's responsibility to determine who speaks when. And by simple observance to that process, the meetings tend to run a lot smoother. It is hard for the people taking minutes or trying to take notes to help you frame a resolution if more than one person is speaking at a time. We like to consider this to be a forum for achieving consensus among the group rather than debate. Now, most certainly there'll be items where there's different opinions, and we encourage you to air them. It's a little bit different than a council meeting in that, you know, council meetings tend to debate positions a little bit more. In this, because the ultimate goal is to provide a consistent input from the body to council, the more that you can work towards consensus, the more useful typically the recommendations are. Now, again, that's a suggestion. You may choose to be a commission that has lively debate, and that's totally within your purview. There may be matters that are contentious and require significant discussion, but if we can keep an eye on the goal of coming up with a resolution that can be supported by the group and forwarded to council, the process tends to be more rewarding for everyone. So consensus-based resolutions, what we mean by this is that we really would prefer if the group is able to provide one recommendation resolution containing specific directions to council and recommendations for improving development applications or design policy. So really what that would mean is that there will typically be options provided in the staff report. And the first one will be that, you know, council or this Advisory Land Use Commission recommends to council that the application be considered subject to the following considerations, and then one blank bullet. And what we'd like to think of is that the commission will go through a process to fill in the blanks in the bullets. Or there may be an instance where the commission decides that an application is not in the best interest of the village and would make a recommendation that council not proceed for the following reasons. And again, the commission would fill in the bullets. But I'll just depart for a little second and tell a story. I was working on a major community plan in Squamish called Waterfront Landing, 1,500 homes, and it had been 6 or 7 years in the process. We went for our final community check-in with Committee of the Whole, which functioned kind of like this group. And at that time, we weren't using a consensus-based resolution model. Instead, we were trying to capture what each individual Committee of the Whole member suggested. And we left that meeting with very clear direction that we had to provide more parking and we had to provide less parking. And because the committee didn't take the step of determining what the body wanted as a whole, it became kind of a Gordian knot. And at a staff level, we were really uncertain what to do, and we had to return for additional direction. So what the consensus-based resolution idea is that the resolution will be one that's endorsed by the majority of the board or of the commission. So there might be certain things that an individual member disagrees with. There may be a debate that leads to that, and they may choose not to support the resolution on that. But more often than not, we see that there's compromise and there's understanding. And most of these resolutions, in my experience, do go through with unanimous or close to unanimous support. So this is a really complicated chart. I saw this today and I realized that the last time this presentation was given, I thought maybe we should redo this, and it's been a couple of years, so I'd forgotten about it. But this is kind of a basic meeting process. And again, this is a suggestion. It's a model that I've used before that works more often than it doesn't. But there's a couple key things that I'd ask you to consider as we walk through this. Every one of the times you deal with a matter referred by council or on an agenda, it will start with a staff presentation, and the staff report will be provided in advance. The presentation will be an elaboration of that report. Sometimes it might even include some updated information, or they don't always necessarily match, but staff will present between the report and the presentation what they would like you to consider, the relevant background information and so on. At that point, after the presentation, it's a great opportunity for the commission to ask questions of staff. Commissions handle that one of two ways. One is that they quite literally go around the room or around the Zoom and ask each member if they have any questions, just to make sure that it's not dominated by one member or that everyone has the opportunity to ask a question. That can go until it's exhausted. So often some groups will do one question at a time, go around the room if you have to go around more than once, until the questions have been exhausted. Once the commission has exhausted questions of staff, questions of clarification typically, again, these are questions, not debates and not comments, but questions to make sure that everyone has as fulsome an understanding as possible. The next step is to hear from the applicant. So the applicants will give varying degrees of presentation depending on how big the item is or the issues that are being requested for consideration. Here again, we've suggested perhaps 2 rounds of questions of staff or the applicant. I don't know why it would be limited to 2 rounds necessarily, but it's kind of the same process. Often when you hear an applicant's presentation, it prompts a question of staff, which is why, again, we're not being exclusive here. We're suggesting that if there's questions that come up from an applicant presentation, that you go around the room until those have been addressed satisfactorily. Then this is kind of important, and I would suggest no matter which model you ultimately choose to follow, after staff and the applicant have presented in a Zoom room, you may keep a staff member in to help with any process, and there is a staff role a little bit later, but most certainly the applicant should be asked to step back, return to the gallery in an in-person meeting, or to return to the participants room in a Zoom meeting. And that's simply because at this stage, the ball would be put squarely in the court of the commission. It can be intimidating and cumbersome to have an applicant who's interrupting or trying to correct comments. It happens enough that it's worth making a fairly hard line that at the end of the question period, the commission will be having its own internal discussion. What tends to work pretty well at that point is, again, kind of going commissioner by commissioner around the room and asking for comments, and really what those comments are as suggestions for the resolution. So if someone feels that a bylaw would benefit by more parking, they would make that comment then. If another commission member says, well, I think there should be less parking, to carry that example through, this is where some informal decision-making model, some additional discussion on that particular point, even if necessary, using a straw poll to see who's in favor of more parking versus less parking, and resolve those. What typically happens here is that the staff member who presented will be writing down the comments. And what tends to happen is there tends to be alignment on a number of things, right? So usually there's multiple commissioners who have the same comments. So we would encourage you to express that. So if someone says more parking and you agree with more parking, even though it's been said before, please say it again so that we get an idea that, if 5 or 6 people have all said the same thing, then we know that's not an area that needs further exploration. What we would do then is we'd typically have by then a fairly clear indication at a staff level whether or not the commission is going to support the application going to council or not. So we'd be talking either about the improvements or suggestions or the reasons why it should not proceed. And we can quite literally list out almost every comment that has been made. And that would become the basis of the resolution. So at that point, as you're framing the resolution, the commission would go point by point and make sure that there's at least enough consensus for it to survive being included in the resolution. Once the commission's agreed on what it ought to contain, then it follows the simple first, second, all in favor voting process. So really what we're trying to do here is make sure that all of the comments are raised at an individual level. There's an opportunity for the board to address and if necessary, debate or disagree with them. But at the end of the day, to capture those into one cohesive resolution. And the reason that's important and the reason why we want it in a resolution is simply that it's very difficult to track and to manage after the resolution has been passed, any comments that have not been included in it. So again, we see this from time to time, particularly I'm experiencing it with other boards and councils right now where you go to a meeting and there might be 55 individual comments and they might not all be aligned. They might be different, and it makes it really problematic to try to address them. And when you're working on the development side, sometimes you have to pick which ones you will address and not. And that's really not what we're hoping to do here. We're hoping that this group will really help improve projects and help improve the review of projects for both staff and council. So the consensus-based resolution process is, again, one model that has worked more often than it hasn't in my experience, but it's up to you to determine exactly how the group wants to run it. And then most importantly, I know sometimes with these groups, there's question about what it all means and what happens at the end. The typical process when a resolution has been passed at a group like this is that it will appear on a council agenda, usually the first agenda after the minutes have been adopted. And even before that, staff take these recommendations quite seriously. It almost inevitably leads to a meeting with the applicant to follow up on how the individual comments will be addressed. And from time to time, there might be a comment that can't be addressed for some reason. Maybe it's something that had been thought of and didn't work in a particular circumstance. When the application is reported to council, if that's the role, the resolution will appear in the staff report, and the disposition of each of the suggestions will also be outlined. Sometimes it might be as simple as a line in the staff report saying that staff believe that the applicants have addressed all of the recommendations. Sometimes it might include some more detailed explanation of how, but so it does inform both the staff discussions with an applicant as well as the council review. So staff is ultimately accountable for making sure that the recommendations are taken seriously at both levels. And there's some safeguards in place to make sure that that happens. So at that point, I've yammered on certainly more than long enough. I will take down my presentation, but if there's any questions about the meeting format or how it works, I'd be more than happy to entertain them now. Or if at any point in coming weeks and months, if you have any, Scott, Colin, or myself would be more than happy to address them. Thank you.
All righty. Okay, I did find the notes here actually. So should I continue here as the chair or?
Yeah, certainly. If there's no questions, then you can move on to the next item. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them now.
Okay, perfect. Any questions? No questions? No? Okay, so should we move on then to the next item on the agenda? Okay, I actually don't have the agenda up here. Sorry, I wasn't prepared. I found my other notes, but does anyone else have the agenda for the next item there?
It would be a presentation from planner Colin Brown.
All right, perfect.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen as well. Okay. So the application tonight, so this is an application that comes from us to us from the Agricultural Land Reserve. So it's a non-farm use application for the property located at 1641 Airport Road. This property is located right abutting Highway 99. If we're heading north on Highway 99, it's just before the bridge that goes over the Lillooet River. Airport Road borders the property to the west and the south. Photos here to show you what it looks like when it's not covered in snow. It is the site of the former Adventure Ranch. Some of you may be familiar with that. So the applicant for this application is Cameron Watts. I believe he's on the line, and I'll have some words to say later on. The property owner is Ben Sawchuk, and Mr. Watt is the applicant with a pending purchase of the property. Again, the location 1641 Airport Road, and the most important point of this presentation, this application, is that the land is located in the agricultural land reserve. So I'm going to spend some time in a minute going through what that means. The application is to allow an RV park as a non-farm use on the property. The Village of Pemberton bylaws apply as well, and so relevant for now is it zoned A1 in the agricultural 1 zone, which currently does not permit the RV parks. It also does not have a land use designation, so I'll do some more explanation on that later. So each would require amendments to the official community plan and to our zoning bylaw. Now, those would be a more of a typical application, a usual application for us. In this case, because it's in the ALR, their regulations take precedent. And so we need to evaluate this application to determine whether or not the ALC, the Land Commission, should consider this application or not. Once that process is complete, then it would come back to us for the OCP and zoning amendment. And so this application is somewhat different from what we typically see. So the Agricultural Land Reserve, the ALR, began in the 1970s, and its primary purpose is to preserve farm or agricultural land. Local bylaws still apply. However, they work in collaboration with the ALR regulations. The primary goal is agricultural land. So there's a number of land uses that are automatically permitted. Farm uses listed there. Different farm uses, so processing, storage, some tourism activities are permitted, but also some non-farm uses as well that are typically accessory to a farm use and complement the farm uses. I highlight the agritourism activities in here because the former Adventure Ranch was an agritourism activity, which allowed the Adventure Ranch to operate as it was at this location previously. So agritourism activities must be seasonal, and there's a number of criteria that a property owner or an operator must meet to have that designation. Linked to that are agritourism accommodations, which again, the Adventure Ranch operated a number of accommodation units that have burned down recently, and which allowed the Adventure Ranch to operate. The difference in this case is that agritourism accommodations limit the scale of the operation to 10 accommodation units. This application is for 91 RV sites, so it'd be 91 units. So it's quite a change. And just note, so that this application involves a community farm, which by itself would count as agriculture. And so if it was going by itself, it would be able to go through without this application process. So just quickly, there's a number of applications that can be submitted to the ALC for a number of different reasons. In this case, the application is for non-farm use. It's not seeking to remove the parcel from the agricultural land reserve, right? And so it's in some that they're not far from being a non-adhering residential use, but yeah, in this case, the best fit is for a non-farm use application. So most importantly is our process. At this point, the applications for ALC are submitted through their portal. So it goes to the ALC staff first, and they forward it on to the local government, in this case, the Village of Pemberton. And the primary concern for council coming up will be determine whether or not the non-farm use should be forwarded back to the Agricultural Land Commission for their consideration. Council has option to say yes, and if they say yes, they can add a number of conditions or specify certain information that goes to the ALC. If not, the application does not proceed. And once again, a reminder that questions about the land use and things like density and all that that are really addressed in the official community plan and the zoning amendment application, that process will follow this one. And so those proceed once there is a positive decision from the Agricultural Land Commission. And so right now, the objective for this commission and ultimately for council will be to determine whether or not this application, this non-farm use is in the best interest of Pemberton at this location, rather than maintaining the parcel as agricultural land. So quickly going over some details of the application. Most of this was covered over in the report and the attachments that were in your agenda. The property is just over 4 hectares, with about 85% of that dedicated to the 91 RV sites and the accessory uses to go with that. The remaining 15% on the west side, the left-hand side of your screen, is a proposed community farm. With a number of activities that could support the local food bank. And it's really derived off of Luquette Farms in North Vancouver as an example of programming that could happen on the site. The application touches a little bit on the operations. For the summer months, it would be tourist operation with short-term stays, fairly high turnover. During the winter, it switched to longer stays as an alternative housing option for seasonal workers. An important point is that in the spring and fall, the park would close for several days to switch over between the two programs. So briefly on our planning analysis, well, when we look at these applications, one of the first things we do is look at our OCP and our zoning amendment, or our zoning bylaw. With this parcel, first we find that there's actually no land use designation in the OCP. This is a legacy of the land that was once part of the SLRD and has been included within the Village of Pemberton boundaries since this OCP was adopted. This is important because, again, should this application proceed beyond the ALC decision, it would require an OCP amendment as part of the process going forward. And I've pulled out a couple of excerpts there just from the OCP policies. One about campgrounds, which has some language that looks for applications for potential RV intent camping. But also there are a number of policies that speak to the agriculture policies and the needs to protect our farmland as well. As mentioned, the current zone is agricultural 1. So here you have a list of permitted land uses that currently exist. Again, you have agriculture in there that would cover off the community farm, but you also have the list of principal uses that are all in that list that come from the agricultural land reserve, about what can be automatically permitted in the ALC Act. And once again, the ALC Act takes precedence over Pemberton, Village of Pemberton zoning. So in a case where there's a disagreement, in some cases the ALC will permit a land use that may not be in Village of Pemberton zoning. In that case, the ALC takes precedent. And so you will notice that RV park is not there, so it is not permitted and would require a zoning amendment. With that, zoning amendments must agree with the OCP land use designation. Because this one doesn't have a land use designation, OCP amendment would be required as well. And again, that process would follow this one. Should the application receive a positive decision from the ALC. So as part of our process to date, we sent out a number of referral letters to external agencies asking for comments. Most were included in your package. I'm not going to go through too many of the details. I will note we received a new one today from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. In a letter that they have no objections to the application as it's presented. They had a number of notes on more of the development process, drainage, utilities, sound barriers, and so on. Those aren't necessarily applicable for this stage of the process, but they're good notes to have as we go through the process. Comment from the Diking District, they see a need for the service. Made some notes on the property being in the floodplain and some of the needs that they have to ensure maintenance of our diking system. And especially with the property being right up against the Lillooet River. The Chamber of Commerce also supported forwarding the application to the ALC. Again, with some concerns about sightlines from the highway, making sure that the property is maintained. A number of comments came in from internal departments as well. Again, no real concerns on the agriculture question. Pemberton Fire and Rescue did note the density in the site, and it's still crowded, but also some good opportunities for collaboration with the village, as noted from corporate and from recreation. We did receive one public comment. So with most applications, staff communicate with the applicant and recommend that they speak with the neighbors and those close by to them to make sure they're aware of what the application is about. So that happened in this case, and so we did receive a letter from the neighboring property owners that was in your package. They're primarily opposed to the application, citing a number of concerns over density, potential noise, and traffic impacts. And so once again, what we come to where we are in the process and the role of the Village of Pemberton. Really the question for council, which this commission is asked to assist with. The question is whether or not the application should be forwarded to the ALC for consideration. And if yes, what conditions or information should be sent along with the application. Once again, the larger questions on land use that are more applicable to the official community plan and zoning amendment, that will come later in the process. And so a number of the comments and responses that we received may go towards that process more than the current question about agricultural use. But it is still good to note all of these concerns or questions just in the overall understanding of the project and whether or not it is in the best interest of Pemberton to forward this application to the ALC. And so that's the last of my presentation. But please let me know if you need to clarify any of the terms. I know it was a quick run through with a lot of language and planning jargon that yeah, the first time out for some of you with this commission might be a little bit much. So please let me know if I need to go back to anything.
Yoda, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Jeez. Okay. Should we just do kind of roundtable for questions here, or does that sound good for everybody?
Yeah, you can start by the raised hands of the other commission members.
Perfect. Oh yes, raise hand. Okay. Nick Fisher. Here we go.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for the presentation there. I'm still a little bit confused, and I just wanted to be absolutely clear on this. So today, we're just deciding on the agricultural land restriction amendment and not the zoning and OCP amendment. So if we say yes today, it goes to council and then it comes back to us.
Okay, yeah, so I'll explain a little bit more. So at this point, council's decision is simply to accept the application and to whether or not to forward it back to the Agricultural Land Commission for their decision. That they can choose to do that, or they can choose no, and the application stops. It ends there. And so in the case of this commission, you're requested to assist with that decision. So your resolution will go to council as part of our staff report, and council's decision whether to forward it on to the ALC or not. Okay. Assuming that it goes through all of that, if the application gets forwarded to the ALC and the ALC gives a positive decision, then it would come back and be a full OCP and zoning amendment, which is a much more involved process for the village of Pemberton, right? And at that point, this commission would get this application brought back for further discussion on any number of the issues that will be on the table at that time.
Just a quick follow-up question, and so ALC with the abbreviations here. ALC is the Agricultural Land Commission.
Agricultural
ALUC is the Advisory Land Use Commission.
Yes, the acronyms are very similar. I apologize for that. Right. So yeah,
it's okay. I don't think it's your fault.
The ALC, the Agricultural Land Commission, right? It looks after the ALR land, not the ALUC, right? That's this commission.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, moving on. Next person, maybe Jeanette.
Okay, thank you. And thanks, Colin. That filled in some blanks for me, definitely. At this point in time, I do have a list of questions in addition to what we just heard in the presentation. but should I be focusing on agricultural only questions, or can I also ask questions that would help me in responding to the question about whether this is the right use for this property at this point in time?
I would say ask the questions that you need to understand the application, right? Ultimately, that's going to lead towards how you feel about forward the application with the agriculture question in mind. But yeah, whatever helps you understand what we're considering.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to jump into it, or do you want to do a roundtable first while people sort of get their bearings about what we're doing? I have a whole list.
Okay, well, maybe it might be a good idea just to maybe, yeah, if anyone needs any more clarifications, maybe we can move on to that, Kristen.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that I've been on the ALUC before, and I feel like we probably could make I'm asking to staff that could we not make a resolution saying we either support it or don't support it, and maybe we support it but only seeing like i.e. less density or stuff like that. We could have some direction for them as far as what we would want to see before we would support it type thing, because once it's forwarded to the ALC to be taken as a non-farm use, then it's kind of like it's almost already approved in a sense. To be
Madam
taken
Chair, through you, I think certainly, you know, that's something that you could do at the end. Now, I would suggest that you use this opportunity for questions and then hear from the applicants. But the first order when you're making your comments is typically there'll be a clear indication. So the question at hand is whether or not this is something the commission would support, this transition out of the agricultural land reserve to a non-farm use. That's the specific question. What information you need for that, certainly you can ask any question that you like at this stage. But I would go through the process of hearing from the applicants. And then when you get into the comment periods, it'll become apparent whether or not the commission as a body looks like it's going to support this or not. And that will be the first question in the resolution.
Okay.
Okay. Should we just do like a general consensus overall to see if anybody does actually support this, or just to kind of throw it out there?
Madam Chair, through you, you will get there. I would suggest you have that conversation after you've heard from the applicants.
From the applicant. Okay.
Yeah, typically they're afforded an opportunity to speak.
Oh,
so
I see.
If there's questions, you could ask them now of staff, or you could ask them after you hear of the applicants, or you could jump right into comments, whatever you choose. But yeah, I would suggest any clarifications of staff now, and then hear from the applicants before you move further.
Okay. Right. Okay. Does anyone have any other further questions to the applicants? Yeah. Okay. Jenna?
I do have questions to staff, as well as questions that could be directed to the applicant or to staff. So I could hold off until we've heard from the applicant, but there are some questions that I think are best answered by staff.
Okay, perfect. Did you want to just go ahead and ask
Sure.
the staff questions? Perfect.
Sure. So through the chair to Colin, are there any zones or land uses currently in the village of Pemberton that would permit an RV park?
Yeah, so through the chair, there are, I don't recall one that's specifically for RV park. There's definitely permitted land uses for campground, which would certainly include RVs in there. Yeah, I don't recall one that's exclusively RV park, but campground involves RVs, tents, a number of things, and a number of the accessory uses that are proposed in this application as well would be as campground as it's currently defined.
And can you provide a little, off the top of your head, I know I'm asking a lot, what land uses are they? And is it realistic to think that an RV park could be located on another parcel near the village?
Yeah, through the chair. So I don't recall any off the top of my head. That's a little bit for the commission to debate as well, whether or not they feel that this is appropriate for this spot, or should it be elsewhere in the community.
To be
Madam
clear,
Chair,
I mean OCP land uses
Madam
designated in
Chair,
the
through
OCP.
you, sorry. Madam Chair, through you, there's a couple of zones, standard zones. They're mostly the public zones. So when the village put together the zoning bylaw, the lands that are zoned public institutional typically allow campgrounds. Now, I can't think of one that would possibly be suitable for that use. That zoning is not applied broadly throughout the village. It's concentrated more at areas like the community center and so on. There is an outdoor recreation designation in the OCP and zoning for that land use tends to be out towards oh, help me out. Heading towards Whistler, Tisdale.
Yeah, it's south along the highway.
The Tisdale area by the BMX or the motocross track and racing. So it's not a use that has a lot of play within the village boundaries, but there are land uses and areas already that would include that among a range of other uses.
Yeah, and I'll note as well. Right, really, the village's land base is actually relatively small as well. So there will be people who will know the campgrounds, say at Nairn Falls, that are outside of the village boundaries, but they're close by. And there will be others like that where not necessarily within the village of Pemberton, but are nearby.
Thank you. Can I ask another question through the chair?
Alrighty, yes.
Oh, have there been many recent precedences with the Village of Pemberton for successful non-farm use applications? And any that would be even in similar commercial nature to this one?
So that one's quite quick. So this type of application for Village of Pemberton is very rare. Off the top of my head, I believe the last application from the ALC of any kind was about 10 years ago, right? So this process actually outlives most of the staff who last dealt with it. So it is very rare for the Village of Pemberton.
Madam Chair, there is one pretty significant comparable. It's you can actually see it on the highway. It's near the education site on the Sunstone lands. There's a treed area adjacent to the highway, the festival grounds. That has a non-farm use. I believe it's a non-farm use, but it has an ALC exemption for a campground. But that dates back, I believe, possibly as far back as the 80s. So nothing recent for sure.
Thank you. But have there been applications or only no successful applications?
No applications as far as I'm
No
aware.
applications.
No.
Yeah, I believe the last ALC application came through was for the music festival years ago.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, may I ask another question?
Okay, sure.
I don't know if we want to be this formal, but has any security been provided for the community farm component of this application? As in, how engaged is the food bank? Would there be another potential operator? Is there any security offered by the applicant to ensure that that farm is actually operated if the potential farm operator falls through?
Yeah, so with that question, that's really a question that would likely get addressed later on in the process. So through the OCP and zoning amendments. That's really where the village has the most tools at the disposal to get security on something like that. And so Yeah, it's likely a little bit early in the process to be considering that. That would be worked out later on in the process.
Okay,
Perfect.
thank you. And then I think finally at this point in time, are the impacts on surrounding agricultural operation known? Have they been studied, or likewise the potential impacts of surrounding agriculture on a semi-residential use? Are they known at this time? Has the applicant provided any sort of study by an agrologist? And I'm thinking lighting, noise, density, traffic.
Yeah, so at this point, no study of that kind has been done. Typically noise, nuisance, right? These type of things were actually brought up in a number of the responses. Which the applicant may speak to that a little bit more. Yeah, in our communications, it's been quite positive responses and willing to work on those issues, but no studies, no formal assessments have been done to that effect.
Okay. I think I just have one more for staff. In your report, I believe that was your report that mentioned the proposed area of impermeability. Do we know what the current area of impermeability is, as in the current footprint of buildings and or any paved areas, and what that change is proposed to be?
Yeah. To date, there really hasn't been an evaluation on that point. There are definitely some regulations in the ALC's own regulations on permeable surfaces and that. And so I think at this point it'd be best for the Village of Pemberton to wait to see what the ALC has to say on those. But before we go about any of our assessments, and so that's part of what the ALC will consider, and will determine if the application gets that far.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Nick, did you want to go ahead? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I just have one question for staff, if I may, through you, Madam Chair. Do we have any idea, I mean, as long as I have been here, that was the adventure ranch, and it was used for a variety of different operations, including coast range heli skiing. Do we have any idea of when or if that land has ever been farmed at a significant level, or has it just been used for sort of agritourism?
Yeah, I'm not aware when it was used for full agriculture farming. They certainly had their farm designation and had some agricultural use in our operation when the adventure ranch was there. They would not have been able to run their agritourism operation without that. I believe had something to do with horses and tours to that effect. I'm not aware when there was any full agriculture or farming going on in operation on the property.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I also have one question, if that's fine. Just wondering, since it's the property's close proximity to the Lillooet River, I would think that a portion of it along the river edge there is within the riparian area. Did the applicant mention that at all? And would there be like an environmental assessment? Did they say anything about that in their application?
Yeah. So with this application doesn't address that issue specifically. In this case, we're considering that the agriculture use and whether or not it's appropriate to consider the non-farm use on the property. It is likely that riparian issues will come into play when we get to the OCP and zoning requirements. And yeah, certainly when we get to that point, we also have development permits within our OCP as well that deal with land constraints and things like riparian areas. It's in the floodplain as well, so we'll have to consider all of those issues as we move forward.
Okay, perfect. All right, so
So through you, if there are no further questions, then we'll, from the commission members, then we'll promote the applicant to a panelist so he can speak on behalf of the application.
okay, perfect.
There I am. Good evening, Madam Chair. Good evening to all of the participants on the council. My name is Cameron Watt, and I am the applicant, not the owner of the property at this particular point, but the applicant. This is an interesting process to go through for sure. Let's start out first with the actual plan itself, which Colin referred to. The overall property is 10 acres. Early on, when we first met with the Village of Pemberton staff, and at that meeting was Scott and Colin and Lisa as well too. We had a number of things that came up. This was on October the 21st of last year. Number of things that came up that were addressed, and we continued to address staff's concerns and have done so as the issues have arisen. I think it's important to note that in the review that I've done, it's been a very long time since this property, if it ever was used as farmland, that there was any farming taking place. And the reason for that is if you reference the Pemberton Valley Diking District letter, which is Appendix C in your package, you'll see that the second sentence is, this area has not been farmland in a very long time. So there seems to be no loss of agriculture, and it should be noted that the land is low quality for agriculture as well. And certainly visibly from a soils point of view, that would be indicative of that comment. The other thing that's interesting about this piece of property was that at some point, there is quite a significant amount of what we developers refer to as preload that went onto the property. And with any agricultural piece of land, there needs to be a permit taken out for that. I'm not aware that that has taken place. So that material will stay on the property and can be used after a review for road bed. The early on, one of the things that came up was what benefit is this application going to be to agriculture? And so after some thought about that, because the initial plan didn't consider that, we spent time talking to Lautet Farm in North Vancouver, that they have a very successful operating model where there are farm managers that are a part of the overall farm, but it's a real benefit to the community from the point of view of it generates a six figures amount of money that goes back into the community annually through the growing of vegetables mostly. It's very well supported by the community. There's a very strong contingent of volunteers, and it's used as an opportunity with local schools to promote the growing of food. So that dedication of the overall land is about 15% of the overall 10 acres. The other 8.5 acres considers the 91 RV spots. It also, in the application, there is the barn that's on the property currently that will be refurbished and used as an activity center, along with the addition of a pool and other associated buildings to the pool. It is important to note in this application that none of the structures other than the existing barn are permanent in nature. So when you consider what the property allows currently, it allows for, we'll call it 10 little homes, and I don't profess to know the size of those, that would be very permanent in nature. So given the fact that the soil is not good and that there are no permanent structures, it seems that it would be more of a positive benefit serving a larger community of users that would be visiting the community and spending their dollars. Now, critical to understand is that this is a seasonal operation, April through to October. For the balance of the time, we run a program called a winter stay program. The winter stay program is very definitive. You sign a 6-month contract to stay on the property. The reason for that is that it precludes any sort of challenge with the Residential Tenancy Act. So the person coming in knows that they're there for 6 months. The park closes for 3 days on either side of that particular winter stay program for maintenance, both as you go into the summer and as you come out of the winter stay program. When you think of the potential traffic, we'll call it, I think one of the concerns raised by one of the neighbors, and out of all of your package, the only thing that I take exception to is the letter from the one neighbor that it certainly seems like all of the neighbors were involved in writing this letter. And I can assure you that we did take staff's recommendation to get in touch with as many neighbors as we could. And certainly I talked to some of those neighbors who had questions, but I didn't find them to be opposed to the application. So with respect to the 91 spaces, the overall density considers proper roads, and in your package, or actually I don't know in your package, but one of the drawings, CAD drawings that was added near the end before this meeting was the drive aisles and turning radiuses for fire trucks. The fire department didn't have any challenge with the application that I'm aware of, but they did want to know that they weren't going to have a challenge getting fire trucks in and around the density. We could not effectively and the economics don't work for less than the spaces that have been presented. And from the original application, staff will confirm that this is a significant number less spaces than was originally planned. So I make that point because the thought that we could actually run this cost effectively with 50 spaces doesn't exist. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. With respect to any concern about noise, we have an on-site manager in all of the operations that we have that controls that. And there's a quiet period after, depending on what night it is, 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night. And so the noise is strictly monitored, and any sort of lighting associated would be away from the highway and more focused on the actual golf course lands. With respect to the pool, one of the things that the community requested was access to the pool for swimming lessons. I think Ms. Elmore was, through the chair, was involved in something to do with swimming at some point I read. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's obviously a need within the community, and we've said that we would be open to looking at that, but needed first to research what sort of liability that we would have associated with swimming lessons for our local programs. With respect to the concern about the farm, there'll be a nonprofit society set up, and that nonprofit society will involve local organizations and locals that choose to participate in the success of the farm. There was a comment about sewage. Just for clarity, we intend to tie into the sewage and water that runs right past this site. In other parks, we haven't had that benefit. And so we've built the latest and greatest from septic systems, and in turn are very familiar in working in floodplains and precious aquifers and rivers. And we have certainly demonstrated successfully that we can work in those environments. My background, just so you know, is a combination of land development and agriculture. Part of what I do is I represent one large Canadian company based in Eastern Canada that buys agricultural land, only Canadian agricultural land, and leases it back to farmers because the capital cost of farming these days has grown such that the land has become very expensive and untenable for lots of folks. The other company that I represent grows fruit, sizable company worldwide. They love British Columbia, and they have patented a particular way of growing raspberries under hoops and in pots, producing very high yields. I'm very involved in the agricultural community as it relates to blueberries, cranberries. There's a significant blueberry cranberry farmer at the end of the valley who is a good friend of mine, who is looking to increase their holdings in Pemberton. And the reason for that is because Pemberton has turned out to be a great place to grow cranberries. And the reason for that is because you get the heat in the summer, and then you have the cool nights because you're in the mountains, and that allows the fruit to recover. The farm designation, I'm sure, had something to do with, potential some sort of taxation benefit. But, I think that we really believe that we'll be generating a lot of new income for the community. The site, in our opinion, is perfectly positioned. The positioning of the entry and access points and egress points, we believe, work very efficiently and essentially takes the traffic off the highway and around the corner on Airport Road. And I know that the Village of Pemberton would probably prefer no sort of asphalt on the site, and certainly we've considered that for the drive aisles. There are options that can keep material in place without having to use asphalt. Asphalt is better, for an RV situation, but it's not a requirement by any means. So I believe that that's a taste of all of the material that you have, and I'm certainly available for questions. But this is the start of a long path. Probably one of the things that I haven't addressed is, what do you know? Your question might be, what do you know about operating RV parks? I was one of the original two founders of a company in BC called Pathfinder. I'm no longer involved on a day-to-day basis, nor am I on the board of directors, but I helped acquire, as the president of the company, 3 locations, one in Agassiz, which happens to be in a floodplain and happens to be in an agricultural, a sensitive agriculture area, one in Fort Langley that our company operates under contract with Metro Vancouver, and then the last park, which is in Parksville, adjacent to the Englishman River, which sits on a very precious aquifer. That's me.
Right.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Cameron. Okay, should we do an opportunity now to ask the applicant questions directly? Is that the?
Yeah, that's correct.
Does anyone who would like to clarify anything with the applicant here or have any questions? Okay, Jeanette.
Thank you. Oh, I am on, sorry. Thank you through the chair to Mr. Watt. First of all, no, that wasn't me asking about swimming lessons for kids, although it would also, I would love to see that as well. But I do have a question about the pool. When you say that there will be no permanent structures on the site, how will the pool be constructed? Is it an above ground pool?
Through the chair to Ms. Elmore, no, I stand corrected. If we're referring to the pool as a structure, that would be the only permanent structure. So no, we've researched above ground pools, and in our opinion, it's not an effective application. Now, those that build above ground pools would take exception to my comment, but in all of the investigation and applications and installations we've done, an in-ground pool will weather better than something in steel. Now, but it will be considered in a floodplain application where it would be elevated, and I can't confirm to the height, but it would be elevated with the necessary handicap access on the site. So that would be the only permanent structure other than the existing barn.
Okay, so will there be any decking around the pool? Will you have concrete surrounding it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So no other new impermeable surfaces on the site. Everything else has been considered to be able to be restored if this property were to revert to agricultural use.
Correct. One day, 20 years, 30 years down the road, if something different happened, the only thing that you're doing, through the chair to Ms. Elmore, the only thing that you're doing is, or the only thing that you're disrupting is the installation of the underground piping that's required. But none of that is like a building structure which is set above the ground, that obviously would be there for a longer period of time. All of our structures are not permanent in nature. They can be removed at any time.
Thank you. Through the chair, may I ask another question?
Okay, yes.
So Mr. Watt, I understand that you have experience with agriculture. Have you completed an agricultural report? I understand that there's low soil quality in this location. I also know it's a rather small parcel for agricultural use. However, have you or has an agrologist considered alternative non-soil based agriculture?
Through the chair to Ms. Elmore, no. We, in researching the property, and your point is very well made. This site is, it's not that it couldn't be farmed. I'm not convinced that the quality of the soil, it wouldn't be good for the crops currently growing in the valley. But more than that, you are correct, it is small as far as farming operations are concerned. It's hard now to make a living on a parcel that's 10 acres. The exception exists in the Fraser Valley, Ms. Elmore, where quite typically those smaller farms have a sizable house on them, because on an agricultural piece of land now, I may be mistaken, but I believe the rules just changed where you can have 2 permanent structures on a piece of ALR land. So, obviously at some point this had a house which burnt down, but it's, in my opinion, and I could be mistaken, people could argue, it is not a viable size of property to make a living at. Just given the cost of the land, the cost of crops, the cost of labor, typically it's that old economies of scale that it needs to be larger in order to make it worthwhile financially.
And to clarify, you're talking about soil-based agriculture.
Correct. I'm very involved in above ground agriculture. We grow raspberries. The company that I consult to, we grow raspberries above ground, raspberry canes in pots, and we grow them under hoops with a patented material which blocks out harmful UV light and lets in good sunlight. Its only requirement is that it's a significant user of water.
Okay, perfect. So I make sure to keep things going smoothly here as it's kind of, yeah, so I'll just, okay, Kristen, cool. Question please.
Yes, I just have a question for Cameron through the chair. So currently with the zoning, you're saying that like with the agritourism zoning right now, you're saying that you can build like 10 structure, like 10 residential units on that property?
Through the chair to Ms. McLeod, you can build 10 structures. I don't know that I would reference them as residential. They would be referenced as agritourism. So, and please, we weren't involved in that zoning. It predates us. Those structures would be, either Mr. Brown or Mr. McCrae can clarify. I don't know the size of what you can build. I only know that you can build 10 of them.
Okay.
And you can do that legally today.
Okay, Colin, did you want to clarify that?
Yes, so agritourism accommodations allows for 10, they call them sleeping units. So they have a limit. So if it's in a residential building, no more than 4 bedrooms and 10 sleeping units. In the case of the Adventure Ranch, it was 10 cabins, I believe. Right, this also predates me. And so, yeah, that they were restricted to 10 units. And so the one, an important point for the agritourism accommodations is it must be linked to an agritourism activity as well, right? They just can't have 10 accommodation units without that agritourism link as well.
Through the chair to Ms. McLeod, I think the other thing there is that as along with the 10 units that were permissible, I'm assuming, and perhaps incorrectly, that the significant sized house on the property could be rebuilt.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for clarifying. Nick, did you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you through you to Mr. Watt. Just reference, you've put aside 15% of the property, which I believe is 0.61 hectares, as farmable land, as a sort of hobby farm for volunteer usage to farm. I noticed from the renderings that of that 15%, there's quite a lot taken up with car parking spaces and roadways. Do you have an idea of the actual land area that would be actually farmed, as opposed to, you know, the additional areas that you need pathways presumably between lots and so on? Do you have an idea of that actual area of farmable land?
Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Fisher. Mr. Fisher, there is nothing presupposed there yet. On those lands, it's not that there hasn't been anything defined, but it is important to note that the nonprofit society that's formed and the participants will have a say in what happens there. I anticipate that there'll be some greenhouses. I anticipate that there'll be some fruit trees. I anticipate that there'll be an area where instruction can take place. Past that, I have, you know, it's not that we don't want to be involved there. It's that we want the community, like the model in North Vancouver, to be very involved.
Okay, whoops. Okay, oops. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Is there any more questions? All right, great. Well, thank you, Cameron. At this point, I think then we will move on here. Right. Sorry, it's my first day as chair, so I'm just trying to figure it out.
I'll just move him back to a participant, or
Perfect.
sorry, as an attendee. And then you can ask further questions to staff.
Okay, great. Staff, oh yes, anybody else? Is there just questions that we're going to be asking now, or is there?
Madam Chair, through you, at this point, you could move into comments. So again, it's a bit of a decision tree with something like this. The first would be an indication of whether or not this is the type of application, knowing what you know, that the commission would support. And if it is, then we would like to look at things that you'd want to have considered. Now, again, this is maybe not the best one to cut your teeth on because it's not really a village application. The village is really being asked to provide a referral response. But you can include any comments that you would like council to consider in their deliberation of this item in coming weeks. So some of the ideas we've heard so far are things like permeability. That's obviously a concern. Colin, you may know, but I don't know if the village has the ability to provide conditions or subjects in their response back to the ALC or not. But I'll wait for Colin to answer that. But this would typically be the time where you'd provide comments, and each comment will be tracked and then given back to you in the form of a resolution.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, just to follow up from Cameron. Yeah, so I see the two parts to this consideration. To forward the application to the ALC or not. If yes, if council can specify information and certain conditions that they want the ALC to consider. So I would suggest that in the response from this commission, you could address both of those points. If the recommendation is to not proceed, there isn't any requirement for reason, but at this stage, if there are some explanation, that might assist council, and so that's up to you to decide.
Okay, should we just do a quick roundtable here, or we get everyone's kind of views on this application? Kristen, did you want to start? Just because you're the first one here on my view.
Sure. My first thought was, I guess, that this is something that I feel that is needed in Pemberton. I had similar concerns to the letter from the neighbor with the density. I did do my research and seeing how wide on this plan, how wide the roads were and stuff. And it does seem like it is spacious. Obviously, I guess I think that as far as maybe what the community can get out of it, I think that is something that should be looked at. I do like this idea versus 10 cabins. I think that this does give something to the community that is needed versus 10 cabins on the site. So I guess that's I had some obvious concerns, like I said, about the density. What else did I have here? And just the fact that the village doesn't have a zone, and maybe that is something, and obviously I guess that is part of the next process, is developing that zone, which would maybe talk to density as well as the size of the campsites and setbacks and quiet hours and stuff. That I guess would be in the zoning part of it. So as something that the community needs, I do, I guess, support the proposal. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Moving on, Nick, did you want to provide some input there? Oh, you're on mute.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah.
Sorry, my headphones just gave up on me there. Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you very much. I think on there's a couple of questions here. On the main question, which is whether this should be forwarded, I think that it should. That area hasn't been used as farmland. I don't think there's any net loss use of farming from that. I do have some significant concerns myself along the lines of what Kirsten said. Traffic, especially the density, although I do hear the applicants concerned that any less density would be non-financially viable. And then I haven't seen any new rendering. I don't think there was included in the package about the turnarounds for fire, but that would be a fairly major issue for the fire department that they weren't able to manage that. But from a question of whether this should be forwarded to the ALC to get their opinion, I think that yes, it should. When it comes back, whether those issues are appropriate for this sort of a development, I feel like that's a separate question that would have to be dealt with on a separate occasion. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, perfect. Cameron, yeah.
Just one observation and perhaps a suggestion. There seems to be some very good comments coming forward in relation to the project itself and in things that will be dealt with in the OCP and zoning, should that proceed. So one suggestion might be, I'm keeping track of those. There could be another resolution. So as much as I'm going against everything I just said in the orientation, if you had a resolution that addressed the question before you, which is whether or not this ought to proceed through council favorably, that could be one question. The other is we could look at a second resolution, which basically is advising council, the applicants and staff that should the application proceed, these are issues or concerns that you'd like to see addressed in a future OCP and zoning application. So that way we're not losing track of the good discussion that's happening today, even though it might not be absolutely germane to the question before you.
Okay, perfect. Yep, Colin.
Yeah, just to add to Cameron, yes, I definitely agree that you could definitely make more than one resolution in looking to avoid the situation Cameron had in Squamish. I wouldn't recommend contrary resolutions, but yeah, you have to decide on the one question and then potentially direction for the future process, or potentially the information you'd like to have considered with this one.
Okay, perfect. I'd like to make a comment as well, if that's fine. I'm just gonna, I don't believe that this application should be forwarded to the ALC, just because I think it sets a pretty bad precedent. It would set a pretty bad precedent for all the other ALC properties. I don't know, to me, it just feels like it's a great idea. And then there is definitely a need for this type of business, but I just don't think that's the right property for it. Just based on the density and its proximity to the highway as well as neighboring properties. So I'll just keep it simple like as that, but that's just my take on it there. Oh yes, and Jeanette.
Thank you. Just first off, Nick, I have a hard time hearing you. I don't know if it's my own technology that might fail us before the end of the meeting. So if I disappear, I apologize. And also Nick.
Oh yeah, it's definitely been tricky. Yeah, I think as maybe if you move because sometimes you come in really loud, Nick, and then sometimes it's a bit weird. Yeah, and then you just can't hear anything you're saying. But
apologies, it was my my earphones just gave up the ghost on me just as I was about to speak there. I'm happy to go through everything that I just said in brief form again, if that makes better, if that's easier for you, Madam.
I think I got the gist of it.
Okay.
I think. I agree with a lot of points that I've heard. I find this to be a very challenging application because it would be great for the village to have an RV and camping area close to town. I am challenged by a number of elements of the application. Also the density, it's a lot of density for that rural location, both on people and wildlife, and visually it's not close enough to the village to be within walking distance. So challenged by the density. I am challenged by what seems like a lack of consideration of other farming options of that land. I don't think it's enough to say that there's poor soil quality and therefore it can't be farmed. There are many, many examples of smaller plot agriculture and non-soil based agriculture that I think needs to be considered before we throw in the towel on this property. And I can give lots of examples if anyone cares. I worry about the proposed use, and despite the amount of permeability, like the gravel in the grass, there would likely also be contamination due to the RVs and the vehicles. I think it would be unlikely that this property, once developed as proposed, would ever revert to agricultural land. That's a big challenge. And then like Jagoda is saying, this would set a precedent, and we have to ask ourselves, why this property and not another? There are many smaller agriculturally designated properties close to town that have minimal farming or are below their potential currently. But the OCP does have policies to protect farmland for future use. It probably also speaks to food security. And I think if we focus on the current economic benefits, that it would be very short-sighted in terms of the environment and food security. So I think it's a challenge, but I lean towards not supporting this application.
Okay, thank you, Jeanette. Cameron?
Okay, Madam Chair, through you, just from what we've seen as a commission tonight comprised of 4 members, there's 2 views, either positive or negative, and that's perfectly okay. That's good. That's fine. The implications, though, is that if a recommendation was put forward for either approach, it would most likely be a deadlock and resolutions fail. Now, we could sit here all night trying to come up with a consensus-based approach to that. But one alternative you may want to consider, which is perfectly acceptable, is to advise council that you were unable to achieve a consensus on whether or not this application should go forward, and then list out some of the concerns. So again, I don't know that this is, there's obviously a lot of moving parts here and there's differing opinions, and that's okay. Again, as a consensus-based group, we might look towards a resolution that says we cannot give you direction one way or the other, but we note the following concerns. That's an alternative available to you, and those recommendations, they do carry the same weight as a positive or negative recommendation. So you don't necessarily have to choose or debate and try and sway each other one way or the other. So if that's the commission's will, I can type up some quick wording here based on what I saw and start listing some of the concerns, and we can move in that direction if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, Nick? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you. Just my recommendation to move forward was really in regards to just the agricultural land use. My actual opinion about this whole project is that it is not in the right place, and that the density is too great, and the traffic concerns have not been appropriately addressed. However, my recommendation to move forward was because I didn't think those were relevant to the question at hand. However, it sounds like, having heard everybody else speak about it, that those concerns maybe are. So I don't know whether that sways things one way or the other, but I just wanted to make sure that my opinion was not one way, not being assumed to be one way when it's necessarily the other.
Certainly. Well, Madam Chair, with your indulgence, if I could just have a minute, I perhaps I'll put up both options, but I now hear that it's trending in a different direction. So just give me one moment here to type something out.
Okay, Kristen, did you want to say something here?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to say towards it, because obviously, I mean, I do definitely support agricultural uses in the valley. I guess I looked at this as what could be there and how it would benefit the community. So, you know, like this could be one big large property with one big large house on it and very minimal farming actually happening. Or it could actually have a benefit to the community, even though it is on ALR land, which I would agree. It is in what I thought to be potentially maybe one of the only places where something like this would make sense. As far as like proximity to the village, access to sewer and water, it's not in a high density residential area. It's close to like the Lillet River, you know, so I guess that was the thing that I was looking at, maybe the potential for community amenity, i.e. a pool. So yes, I mean, I definitely did look at the fact that it is on ALR land, but as far as just looking at this and being somebody who grew up in Pemberton, you know, I'm very aware of the locations in Pemberton and where things maybe would feel right and wouldn't feel right. I felt that this was potentially a good location for a project like this. So just wanted to say that.
Okay, thank you.
And through the chair, am I on?
Okay.
Am I allowed to jump in?
Yep, you're just cutting out a bit.
I was going to, I'm sorry, it is my phone. It's the Wi-Fi here. Am I okay now?
A little bit, yeah. He's just kind of
Yeah,
freezing.
I'll try to be quick. I am okay going forward in support, but with a number of concerns or conditions.
Okay, so I guess we're back to, yeah, kind of a half-half scenario here. But I think Cameron, we're fine. Is everybody feel comfortable with if Cameron put together a resolution where we yeah, provide you know, that we're kind of half there and with concerns, so without a definitive decision there. Is that okay with everyone?
Okay, so Madam Chair, through you, just a quick outline. So again, I was kind of trying to keep notes here.
Oh yeah.
The first one was the option where you were unable to reach a consensus. So if it was going to be a 2-2 vote, it does not. I don't believe that's where we are anymore. So I can delete that one, or I'll leave it just in case. So really, the resolution here would be that the ALC recommend to council that the application, and I'm now hearing, proceed to the Agricultural Land Commission. Is that more or less the consensus of the group, that it proceed to the Agricultural Land Commission?
So I guess we got three that say it should proceed. So I voted no. I think Nick voted right. Is that correct? And then we got Jeanette and Kristen voting yes. So I think we're still on a 50-50 there.
We're still 50-50?
Are we?
I mean, I still think that it should proceed to the agricultural land use. Sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
I'm getting confused with my abbreviations. So I think it should proceed to Agricultural Land Commission.
Okay.
But yeah, there are the ongoing following concerns, and that unless they are appropriately dealt with, then that would be an issue.
Perfect. Mm-hmm.
I think it's fine just like that.
Yeah, I think.
Because you certainly don't want to prejudice your future discussion on these items. But you do, Madam Chair, want to make sure that they're noted in the minutes. So the draft recommendation would be that the Agricultural Land Use Committee recommend to council that the application proceed to the Agricultural Land Use Commission, comma, but note the following concerns.
Can I just
Oh, yeah, Colin. Mhm.
interject? That we're proceed to the Agricultural Land Commission.
Yeah, that's where I was getting confused.
Oh, yeah, here we
Yeah,
go.
same thing, ALC, ALUC.
Had to make those so similar. Gross density, okay.
There were some other quite specific comments raised about the zoning, such as how certain aspects of the proposal would be secured and other things that I have not included, but I could if that's where the commission wanted to go.
I think that's a good idea. Did you want to, should we say, write something about the setting of the presidents there also with change it with
Yeah, Madam Chair, through you. I realize that this is purely Village of Pemberton business, but I do note that up in the SLRD, especially up the Meadows, what I think Kirsten was alluding to, there's a lot of land up there that has large houses built on, hobby farms, where people have a farm that is a farm in name only, and that could quite conceivably be the end result with this area of land if something like this were not to go ahead. And I also feel pretty strongly that in areas of actually viable land for farming, that shouldn't be allowed, but it has been. So I think actually the precedent for that has already been set. However, I don't think there's a huge amount of ALR land within the VOP boundaries, as far as I'm aware. So, although, yeah, we need to be aware of potential precedents. When it comes to the bigger picture, I think those precedents have unfortunately already been set.
okay. Thank you, Nick. Kristen, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that I did I think we had in there, like, as far as when it came to the zoning, as far as like density, community amenity, things addressing quiet hours, setbacks, and the number of campsites, because I do think that is going to be an important consideration for this when they go to the zoning steps, because and I think that just having that in that recommendation.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Oh, yeah, Nick, yeah.
Just one more thing there, Madam Chair, through you, is just the issue around ensuring that that fire access is is well and truly guaranteed.
Yes, for sure. And I feel like the traffic is also something that has been brought up numerous times.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like 90 vehicles, trying to turn left onto that highway or right to go back and forth to the village for supplies and such will add considerable amount of traffic to the highway. Okay, perfect. Just looking here at my notes. I just have a quick question. Do these is there a time frame for these meetings? Like, are they from 5 to 7, or is there no specific time? Do they just end when they end, sort of thing?
Typically, I will say this have been on the longer end in my experience, but it's also the inaugural meeting, and this is a complicated matter. So yes, typically they end when they end, but we're getting very close. Perfect. So what I've tried to achieve here is a resolution in 2 parts. So it's one resolution. But the first part is that the application proceed to the ALC, but the following concerns are noted. Density, impact on adjacent uses, potential for other agricultural uses, soil permeability, and the precedent. So there was some discussion on the precedent, but it's in there for now.
Excellent.
And then secondly, that council directs staff to address the following considerations through any future OCP and rezoning applications. So this is getting, again, more specific to those items that if this proceeds that far, again, density is cited, the size of the RVs, traffic impacts, setbacks, fire protection. And I'm just going to check my list. I think that's all that I heard.
Okay, Kristen, did you want to have
Just the quiet hours, I think, being extremely important too. I think that's usually part, there is, I guess, I think there is a, but yeah, quiet hours for
Okay.
sure.
got it?
Oh, and no, and one more, sorry, community amenity, i.e. pool.
Okay, or a community benefit or something, right?
Yes,
Maybe
yes, community
community
benefit,
get something.
amenity. Yeah.
We need a pool. Just build a community pool. Yeah. Okay, and then Jeanette, did you want to say something or?
Yeah, back at least temporarily. The other one that you raised, Jagoda, and I second is the riparian setbacks or any other environmental impacts.
Yes, for sure. Mhm. All righty. And as far as on our agenda, did we have? I'm just trying to go back to my notes
I
here.
have to wait till the resolution's passed.
Oh, the resolution's passed. Got it. Perfect.
Okay, so there we go. I think that's captured everything that I've heard. I won't go through it again, but it looks like two resolutions. It's actually just one, two parts. First, that it proceed with those concerns noted. The second, that if it comes back through OCP and rezoning, that list of items, you recommend that they be addressed. So if you're comfortable with that, it would be a standard mover, seconder, all in favor type vote. And then once the vote happens, this item is closed.
Okay. Mhm. Oh, yep. So Nick moved. Yeah. And then someone seconded. Oh, yeah. Jeanette seconded. Or
No,
no?
sorry.
Oh, you have another question. Mhm.
No, I had another question. I'm sorry, because I had so many tech issues. I'm just rereading it. My comment about soil permeability is really more about the ability to restore the soil post-use for
Okay.
farming. So that we're not just considering this as, essentially what we're considering is an exclusion unless the soils can be restored or unless farming can actually occur on the land in future. Thank you.
I do feel like, sorry, just trying, but I do feel like we should probably keep impermeability in there
Sure.
somewhere, just because there will be, yeah, definitely impact to that. So maybe
Well, it could be another point then.
maybe
if-
another
if
point, yeah, to say.
Are okay
off.
with that.
Yeah, perfect.
It
Like-
might be just future farming viability.
Yes. Perfect.
How does that work?
Delete that bit.
That looks good.
Thank you.
Sorry there, I missed your hand. I wasn't sure what was going on there.
Ozone.
Okay, so should we, yep, now with that, everyone's happy with that, we'll do like another motion there. Okay, yeah, Nick there, second, anyone seconding?
I
Christian,
can second.
perfect. Okay,
Any discussion? Then if none, all in favor.
yes, okay, yep, sounds good. Oh, do you have something to say or?
So I
No.
thought that was an all in favor
Oh, all
request.
in favor, got it.
So yeah, so you can ask if there's any discussion, and
Mhm.
if there's none, then you can call the question, all in favor, all opposed, any opposed. So
Okay.
so you can go ahead and do that part just for
Okay.
formality.
Is there any discussion from this resolution? Okay, so all in favor? Perfect, and then there's no one opposed? Okay, perfect. So it's concluded. Okay,
And the next item on the agenda is discussion for future meetings.
discussion for future meetings.
Basically, that the council, if I may, propose a date and time that's suitable for everyone to attend the meeting, and moving forward, all meetings would take place at this time and date if necessary, i.e. the third Thursday of every month at 5 o'clock p.m.
Does that time work for everybody? Does anyone prefer a different a time? Mhm.
I, if I may speak, a slightly later time would be preferable
Mhm. Like you
to
think-
allow, like even
Just to have-
even set, to allow my partner to take over childcare.
Mhm. Like
I
6
will
feet.
also note that another commission member is unavailable on Thursdays, hence why she was not here, and suggested the dates of availability, I believe, were Tuesdays and Mondays and Tuesday evenings.
I struggle with Thursdays frequently as well. I'm often on call for the emergency department Thursday evening, so Tuesdays and Wednesdays work best for me, but I can make it work.
Yeah,
Yep,
I'll just comment that Tuesday is council nights, once or twice a month. So just Tuesday may not be the best unless we want to be moving the meeting frequently.
How about Mondays? Mondays, does Mondays work for everyone? Mondays,
Yes,
like 6, we could just call it like 6 to 8 p.m. and obviously if it has to go later, it can, but we can try and really stick within the 2 hours.
Mhm.
Everyone can.
I have PVT. I'm also on the board, the PVTA board, and we are Mondays as well. And I can't remember for second or third Monday. I would have to get back. We just changed it.
Okay, Nikki, do you think maybe it's best if you, if we could maybe send out an email or something, or just to try and,
Yeah, we can work this out outside of the meeting and decide on a date that works for everyone.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll wait to hear back from Nikki and then for the setting the date and time for the next meeting, but for now we can adjourn the meeting.
Yeah.
Can I get, motion for that? Right, I think I need one. Yeah, perfect, Kristen, yeah, and Jet, second, great.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, so meeting adjourned, great to meet everyone, have a good night.
All right,
Thank you.
everyone. That was a complicated application.
Yeah,
That's
that was-
a bit of a
Very.
curveball for the first one.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Okay, thanks, have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Good chair.